Welcome to Heart and Mind Talks, a podcast for female entrepreneurs navigating life and business. I'm Vanessa Ortali, award-winning speaker and coach. Join me and expert guests as we uncover how to make success simpler, more fun, and feel truly aligned to you. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who could use a little extra love and inspiration. Let's go. Welcome to episode 17. 17 is actually my favorite number. So on this episode, I want to share with you my personal self-development, personal growth journey and story. I want to share with you the specific tools I use to help move through the situations in my life and how I got to where I am today. But not when I say that, I don't mean a place of my accomplishments and success and business. Even though some of these things that I talk about today will obviously factor into that, I really want to talk about the inside job, the work that I put into myself. I remember asking some of my friends in the beginning of my company when I was branding, and I asked them three questions. I asked them, what do you think my superpower is? What do you think people don't know about me? And what do you think my brand is? And the reason I bring that up is for the one specific question. And the question was, what do people not know about me? And well, most people actually answered the same thing for all three questions, but I want to highlight on that one question of what people don't know about me. And every single person said the amount of work that you have put into yourself and your life. And I say that not to scare you, even though it will scare some people, because I talk a lot about ease and things can feel easy. However, there is a certain amount of awareness and attention needed in order to get to the ease. So I'm going to share with you what that looked like for me. And please know, like I say all the time, everybody's journey is so different and unique, but I want to share my journey. Hopefully some of the tools help you. I also never want you to feel alone on your journey. Maybe you'll find some similarities or maybe some of it will also inspire you to make changes and shifts in your life that you already know that you need to make, because this isn't about me telling you what to do in your life. It's about me awakening things that you already know within you. And that actually brings me to the beginning of my story where I have to be honest and tell you that so much of who I was from a very young age, I never really felt like I belonged. And I don't mean that in like a victim, woe's me. I mean it in the sense that I always knew that I was made for more. And there was more to life that I wasn't being taught and I didn't necessarily know. I never really understood so many of the human experiences, you know, um, uh, for example, the news and just those types of things. I never really got it. I never got so many of the norms that we are told to do. It is like you're told the path to success, but to me, that path to success just never felt right. I felt like everyone was getting on this conveyor belt of life. And I had gotten on in the beginning, don't get me wrong. But then while I was on it, I was just looking around thinking, is this it? Is this all life is? Isn't there's more here? And I know it, but I don't know where it is or how to get there. And I jumped off that conveyor belt pretty early and felt very isolated on that journey because, now I get so many messages from people saying, you inspire me, or I'm so proud of you. I've watched your journey. And all of those comments are great. I really appreciate it. But I also want to emphasize that people didn't necessarily see and didn't know the pain of getting off that conveyor belt, the pain of being alone and knowing there was more, but being so lost because I had no idea. I had no idea what more meant for myself. I needed to find out who I was. I needed to find out who the world was, how to feel more connected with the world, and really just what my purpose was and cultivate more peace inside me. I wanted to feel a hell of a lot better. And I remember watching the movie Inside Out, right? It's a Pixar movie, so don't laugh at me. It's actually very good. And they depict emotions in our brain and basically thoughts in our brain. And there's all these different emotions, and there's happiness, I might get this wrong, but there's happiness, jealousy, anger, sadness. And I remember watching this movie and asking myself, well, what what are the majority of my emotions? How do I actually feel inside? And when I really sat with it, I knew that the majority of my thoughts and emotions were sadness. And I felt just sad inside, regardless of what I was portraying outside. I have always been a pretty bubbly, friendly person. Now, this may also surprise you. I have said this before, but I am also very introverted. I present as an extrovert. I'm friendly, I'm social, but I need a lot of time to recharge. But it doesn't matter. Whatever I was doing, whether it was by myself or with others, there was this internal sadness. And for me, it was at that time when watching this movie that I thought to myself, something needs to change. And for sure, I had been through things in my life. At this point, I was in my 20s and I had already gone through all that other stuff. So let me just highlight a couple of things in my life prior to that, right? I always had this knowingness for more. My mom died of cancer, breast cancer, when I was 18. Prior to her passing away, I did start getting introduced to things like Reiki and meditation because my mom was really trying to heal. So she kind of brought me along on this healing journey, as well as different nutrition and exercise. So I was getting glimpses of that. Gratitude journals. I remember having a gratitude journal when I was in my teens because my mom was doing that to start to heal herself and shift her internal thoughts. So I was exposed to many of these things. I also went to a therapist and did Reiki healing while my mom was sick and even after, to help me heal myself and move through I don't even like the word trauma, but move through the experience of my mom's passing. I want to quickly make a note about coaches and therapists. It's so important for you to find someone that meets you exactly where you're at and gives you what you need at that time. I have had amazing coaches and therapists, and I have also had ones that I did not connect with. I had a therapist, and if you listen to my other podcast about my mom's death, I talk a little bit more about this, but I had a therapist who I hated. And every time he would ask me, he was a cognitive behavioral therapist, but I did take away a couple of things, and I will share those with you. So every time he asked me what my triggers were for the week, because normally, within cognitive behavioral therapy, all of your triggers stem back to your root fears. And I had core beliefs and fears of being alone and not being understood and making mistakes. And so many of my triggers came back to those core truths. And I remember one week telling him, honestly, my triggers this week were you. You just trigger me so much. And you're always trying to put me into a box that I can't fit into a box. That's just not me. But he was very fascinating. And I did not love my experience with my therapist, but he did tell me one thing that I will always remember. And he had asked me, "Are you an angry person?" And I said, he goes, "Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not very angry. So let's say a 1." And then he asked, "Well, are you hard on yourself?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, a 10." And I'll talk more about that a little bit later when I talk about my triggers and my thoughts and just what was coming up for me. But he said, "That's not possible. It is not possible for you to be a 1 on the anger scale and then for you to be hard on yourself, because being hard on yourself is anger directed inward." Oh, I want you to hear that again. Being hard on yourself is anger directed inward. And that was so huge. But, I would not be where I am today without the support of all the good and bad therapists and coaches, because every experience brought me to where I am today. And then even in school, I always had very different jobs, right? I didn't go the corporate route. I always worked for smaller companies and more entrepreneurial. And even in school, when I graduated university, everybody did what was expected of them. And I just never felt like I wanted to. So I always kind of went my own path and never quite did what people expected of me, and loved leadership roles. And I say all these things because for me, the seed was planted early. And I want you to start thinking about in your life when you're younger, because you're still young and beautiful. But when you were younger, what were things that you started to question? There's always these little moments where we question who we are, what is happening around us. Is this all? Is there more? So I want you to start paying attention to those times that you question, and it doesn't matter how old you were. I know that you have questioned things in your life if you are here listening to this podcast right now. And it's in those questions where we start to question who we are, what we like, what we want our lives to look like. Those are the little seeds that start to open us up to look for something more. And asking those questions is also important as we define our purpose. Oftentimes, when we look back in our lives, we'll start to see what were your gifts when you were young? What did you really love to do? If I look back to when I was young, I loved public speaking. I loved sales. I loved teaching and basically coaching. All my friends came to me with their problems. And I use all of those skills today. So for me, my purpose was very obvious at a young age. And I'm so grateful that I get to live out my purpose today. I feel like I wouldn't, at this point in time, I wouldn't want to do anything else. Now, I still am always questioning, what is my next step? What is that? What does my next chapter look like? And I'll share a little more about that later on. But I'm always asking myself, what does that next chapter look like for me so that I can continue to be aware and continue to take my next best step? I truly believe that self-development, spirituality, there's so many words that we can use. Your spiritual awakening, all of these things, the dark night of the soul. For me, it's just your growth journey, how you transform and evolve as a person. And I truly believe there are 3 stages. And I'm going to go through all 3 stages in this podcast today. I think the first stage is when we are blissfully living our lives, not knowing anything different. And maybe still in that stage, we have little nudges that there's something more that bring us into our second stage. But in the first stage, we're kind of just living life. We're doing the things that we were told to do, and it works until it doesn't work anymore, until the nudges become so strong, the voices become so strong that we know we need to do something different. And then we move into stage 2. And I'm going to share all about the nitty-gritties of stage 2 in this podcast today, because a lot of it was painful and deep, and it doesn't sound sexy at all. It was a lot. And that was my spiritual awakening, my transformation, my growth journey. And I can still continue to grow, but in very different ways. And so in this second phase, it was all about finding out, what was that more? Who am I? What does the world look like? And how do I start to shift my patterns and shift my thoughts and truly choose and create the life that I want? And there were lots of tools in there, which I will go into. And then we have stage 3, where I am right now. And stage 3 is, in my experience, maybe there's a 4th stage, but we're in stage 3 right now. So we're gonna highlight this. Stage 3 is when you actually kind of stop. You stop needing all the tools and all of the stuff that got you to where you are today, because you realize all of those things were great in your awakening. But now you're at a different phase, and the things that you're going to need to get you into this next phase are completely different. This is when you already know. You know who you are. You know what's going on in the world around you. You feel super connected with yourself. You may not even need to meditate, because in your awakening phase, you may have needed to meditate. I know I did, for like an hour to really connect and feel. And then in stage 3, you're so connected to that feeling that you could take a deep breath and feel like you meditated for an hour. So the same tools that you use that worked for you in your spiritual awakening may not work for you in stage 3 because you know who you are. You can get there so quickly. And now it's just living and being and integrating everything that you know, because now you know all the stuff. Not to say that you know everything, because we are always learning. And I feel like the more that we realize the more that we grow, the more we realize we know nothing. But for all intents and purposes, you kind of know. You know what's going on here. And you now in that knowing are able to fully embody and fully be and go deeper and deeper into the love that you are, the peace that you are, further than you could ever have imagined. One thing I also must add here is that in this third phase, you no longer give your power away to other things. And one thing I kind of realized when reflecting, when I went through my spiritual growth and my awakening, you go to all these tools, Reiki, crystals, meditation, you go to healers, all of these things that are helpful at the time because they remind you of who you are. But once you know who you are, you no longer give your power away to those things. And let me explain further, because I really do notice that if you believe that that you need the crystal to make you confident, you're giving your power away to the crystal. If you believe that you have to go to a healer to balance your body, you're giving your power away for your connection to yourself and you knowing yourself. Do you see that connection? And so going into this third phase, you can still be aware and still be grateful for all of these tools, but you no longer need to outsource your healing and outsource your power, because you know who you are and you know the power that you have to heal yourself. And it's always helpful to have tools and people around you, for sure, that can point out blind spots and that could support you and help you to move forward, but you don't need them. And once you realize that you don't need them and you regain your power, that's when this third phase comes, because I really started to realize that a lot of people will get stuck in the second phase of spirituality and awakening because they don't trust themselves. They don't know their power. So they're always giving their power away to different superstitions and things, and they think they need those things. And I started to see how people use spirituality and their spiritual awakening as a crutch and an addiction, always trying to fix themselves, always needing more. And they start to really believe in these superstitions and tools that it actually masks their fear. So let me give you one more example. A superstition that you can't put your purse on the ground, because if you put your purse on the ground, then you're not going to be abundant. When you know your abundance, that superstition doesn't matter. You know that you don't need to give your power away to that, right? So if you think about all the superstitions that you believe, don't open an umbrella in the house, don't do all those things. If you're really believing those, I want you to start looking if it is masking a fear. Do you need to start trusting yourself more, knowing your truth, knowing your abundance, and realizing nobody can take that away from you? Your success is inevitable. Your healing is inevitable. Your love and who you are is inevitable if you just own your power and realize who you are. And so in those three phases, where are you right now? There is no judgment in either phase, but just being aware of where you're at, I think, is super fun, because then you know what support you need, what tools you need. So let's start going into my phase 2. What did that look like for me? So we go back to the movie Inside Out. I realize that I am just sad and something has to change. I know all the things. I've already been reading all the self-development books, but I wasn't integrating what I knew. There was a disconnection between what I knew and who I was. And I was still living in so many patterns and habits that I didn't want to be living in, but I also wasn't even aware of. So, first steps for me, I hired a coach. The really good thing about this coach at that time was I would take notes. I was a great student and I would take notes of all of the triggers that I had during that week and how I felt and what came up for me. And then in my coaching call, we would go through all these triggers and really start looking at, okay, how did I respond? How am I feeling? How can I change that? And how can I shift it? So I don't get as triggered, and or when I do, I know how to move through it. So it's really looking at those tools to move through. And I'm actually going to give you, I created a 5-step system. And I kind of call this my own mental Olympics because in this time when I hired a coach, and that was just my first step, I'll go into the rest of the steps. I had had enough. I had hit my, I guess you could say, like my rock bottom at the time because I just had had enough. I needed to change and I knew there was something more. And so I call this my mental Olympics, where I trained hard. I remember, and it was winter time at the time. I remember and I remember it was winter because of the time that the sun went down, because the sun went down super early, 4 or 5 o'clock. It's now dark. And I remember as soon as it got dark, I would get in bed and I would meditate, I would journal, I would cry, I would do all the things to process my emotions, process my triggers, really pay attention to my triggers and what was coming up for me, my internal thoughts, the stories that I was attaching to everything in the world, the experiences that I had had that were creating how those stories and how I showed up in the world, because how you show up in your triggers aren't just about that trigger. It's about all the other things that happen that accumulate to get to that trigger. And so I actually created a 5-step system, how to move through my triggers. So number one, once I noticed I had the trigger, I would stop. Number one, stop. Number two is I would breathe, because every time you breathe, you're able to stop the signals. And I remember this stat, and you probably noticed this by now if you've been listening to my podcast, but sometimes I get all my stats and all my things mixed up, but I'm just going to own it. And I remember, I think it, what is the, now when I tell these stories, I remember things that I used to talk about, but not fully. And so I think it was something like, okay, when you get triggered, those chemicals are moving through your body. And if you can just breathe for 90 seconds, it will start to calm those nervous system responses, the hormones, everything. Everything past 90 seconds, that's all you. In your chemical response will last 90 seconds. So if you're triggered, just stop and breathe and count 90 seconds and then see how you feel after that 90 seconds. If you continue to go with that momentum, it's just going to make things worse. So number one, you stop when you notice you have a trigger. You breathe, maybe for 90 seconds. But now I can do these 5 steps so much faster. Number 3 is I listen. I listen to the thoughts that are going through my mind, the stories that I'm creating. And if I need to, and I'm in the space to do so, I'll actually say them out loud. Because when you start to listen to what's going through your head, you realize this isn't a story. This is a story. This isn't true. This isn't something I want in my life. And this isn't my truth. This is just an old story, an old pattern. Oftentimes, they're not even your beliefs. They're beliefs of friends, family, society. So if you start to listen, then you can start to move through them. You can be aware of them and start to shift them. The fourth thing that I think is the most important step is to validate your thoughts. So often we are at war with our thoughts because we think, oh, that's so stupid. Why am I saying this again? And I'm the worst. And we just end up putting ourselves down and we just combat it, and or we want to shift it right away. And sometimes the most beautiful thing is to validate it. So what that might sound like is, let's say, you're angry about a situation and you think to yourself, well, that person is so selfish and I need help and they're not listening to me. And validation would sound like, I hear you. I get it. That must feel really frustrating. You want to feel heard. Everybody wants to feel heard. They want to feel loved. They want to feel safe. However, most people are looking for all of those things from other people and in the external world. The most powerful thing you can do is do it for yourself. Start to hear yourself, listen to yourself, validate yourself, make yourself know that you are safe and heard. It is like a child. If a child is having a temper tantrum and you just start out by saying, "Stop crying, stop it, you're embarrassing me, change it up, be happy," right? You're fighting it. It does not feel good. But if you sat there and the child was having a temper tantrum and you said, "Okay, let's take a deep breath together. Talk to me. What's going on? What happened here?" And they said, "Oh, Bobby hit me or Bobby did this or whatever." I'm sorry, Bobby. I don't know Bobby, but that's the name that came to me. And then you said, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that happened to you," or "That must have been really difficult." The child will say, "Yeah," because they feel heard. So listen and validate. Step number 5 is to rewire. So that's where we can actively choose something different. So if we go back to the example where where you were feeling like someone was selfish and not hearing you, and you said, "Oh, that must have been really difficult." To rewire is, and how can we look at this differently? How is this looking? How is this happening for us? How can we start to show up in a different way? How can we process these emotions differently? And or how would you like to feel instead? There's many different ways you can rewire, and a lot of other people will call this reparenting, but you're essentially reparenting what you want the response to look like. You can also use visualization in this rewiring process. I absolutely love visualization. You don't have to go through all five of these steps to visualize, but I'm just noting here that visualization and reprogramming and rewiring is really, really important. Here's why. When you rewire, but let's talk about visualization specifically. When you visualize something, you are teaching your brain and your body a new pathway. You're showing yourself, okay, if this happens again, here's the alternative pathway, because your brain doesn't know the difference of whether it's happening in real life or in your mind. Athletes do this all the time. They visualize winning the race. Why? Because when you actually win it, it is not the first time you've done it. Usually it is the 100th time that you have done it when you actually do it in person. So I want to emphasize this here, this rewiring, this visualization. You can visualize and reprogram every single experience that you have ever had in your life, because when you had that experience, you were younger, you were a different person. You would not respond the same way if that happened today. So you get to show up differently. You get to rewire it. You get to change it. And what that does is when anything happens in the future or the present that might have triggered that experience, number one, it probably doesn't trigger it anymore. And if it does, your options to react are much greater. You have many different options that you have already gone through in your brain, that your brain can say, "Okay, what do I want to do here? A, B, or C?" And if you do it enough, your brain will go, "Nope, normally I was an A, now I'm a C." And then once you continue to practice, you will start to just show up and respond in C. A and B won't even be options anymore. It will be all C. It's reprogramming. That reminds me of right now, I work with a private Pilates instructor, which has been amazing, especially during pregnancy. And I'm really trying to ignite different muscles, because right now I have certain muscles that are always firing, and I don't want those muscles to fire anymore. I want more balance. I want to even it out. I want different muscles to fire. And so when I'm working out or when I'm walking, I have to really, really consciously think about the muscles that I want to fire, because ones that I don't want to fire are firing, right? This is exactly the same with your emotions. You have reactions that are happening that you don't necessarily want to be happening. So you have to intentionally choose the reaction that you want, just like I have to intentionally choose the muscles that I want to fire. Now, here's the beautiful part. In the beginning, it is the hardest. In the beginning, I may have to think 100 times a day about the muscles that I want to fire. But the more I think about the muscles that I want to fire, the stronger they get. And when they get stronger, I don't have to think about it as much because it becomes an automatic response. So we're shifting the automatic response. And the same thing goes with your habits, your stories, and your emotions right now. Right now is the hardest time to change them because they're not an automatic response. You have to intentionally think about the reaction every time you get triggered. And it can be super annoying because you may have to think about it 100 times. But tomorrow, it may be 99. And the day after that, even less, because your reaction and the new pathway, the new reaction gets stronger. And when your muscle, your brain, your brain muscle, when your muscles, your brain, your stories, your thoughts, when they get stronger, you don't have to be as intentional about them because you're reprogramming them to the person that you want to show up as. And that is beautiful. This is why I called it my mental Olympics, because in the beginning, I had to be so intentional about my reactions and it felt like a lot. It really did. But then every day, my reactions got a little bit better. I got a little bit more aware of where I was living off balance. I was noticing where my thoughts and my stories weren't aligning. So, for example, I knew that I wanted to live in love. I knew I didn't want to judge others. I knew that I wanted to have more peace, all of these things. So if you start thinking about what are your truths, what do you want to choose in this life? And then when you look at your triggers and or the stories that are happening in your mind, do they align with those? And if they don't, and there's a gap, then you need to shift. And I see this so often with people's triggers. I mean, having a community and being on social media and putting myself out there, I see people's triggers all the time. And people will say they're spiritual people, they're yoga instructors, they're life coaches, and then they get triggered and they have this automatic response that does not align to their beliefs and their values. Now, a lot of people can't see that disconnection. But if you can start to see the disconnection, and that's where a coach or someone might help, if you can start to see that disconnection, that is where your life changes. And that's where you start to fully integrate and embody the person that you want to be. That's how you start living as your highest self, letting go of all of those patterns that are no longer serving you, that you did not want to create. It really is like before coming on this earth, we're told, and I literally just envision it where we all get together and someone comes on the microphone and says, okay, you have been selected to go onto earth. Now, here's the thing. You know who you are right now. As soon as you go into earth, you're going to forget. And your whole journey and the task is for you to remember again. That's it, is for you to remember again. But along the way, you're going to learn some things that aren't going to make sense and that are total lies and that people are going to tell you and you're going to believe. And then you have to let all those things go and shed them and find your truth. So I'm just encouraging you to really start asking yourself, what are those things that I have picked up along the way that are no longer my truth that I need to let go of? That is your journey. And I know we all go through things in life, some things harder than others, some people's lives harder than others. I mean, when I hear people's stories, holy Moses, the things that people have been through are just incredible. But you get to a point in your life where you cannot be a victim anymore. It truly doesn't matter what happened. You get to choose who you are today, and you have to let go of all that other stuff because it is holding you back, and you decide how long it's going to hold you back for. People often say with trauma, it is like someone hitting you with a bat and then you picking up that bat and then hitting yourself with it over and over and over and over. Why are you doing that? Put the bat down. Just because somebody hit you with that bat really freaking hard does not mean you have to pick it up and continue. And when you start really asking those questions of what do I believe? Where did that come from? Is this my truth? That is one of the most powerful things you can ever do. Truly, truly asking questions, I believe, is the greatest gift that you can give yourself. And that's why sometimes it scares me in this world, where when people ask questions that are against the norm, they get attacked. I really, really always want to breed within my family, within my community, within myself, and I will continue to share this. Ask questions. I will never get upset for someone asking a question for greater understanding and for themselves and others. And please don't get mad at other people for asking questions, even if it triggers you. They're allowed to ask. They're allowed to create their own reasoning and their own opinion through questions. Questions are so powerful and they really evoke change. But then again, maybe that's why people hate questions, because they don't want people to think for themselves. They don't want to evoke change. Change is scary to a lot of people. Just don't be one of those people. Embrace change, embrace questions, embrace the uncertainty. Oftentimes, well, I still do this. Every year I would come up with a word that I wanted to embody. And I have to tell you, multiple years, my word was surrender. How do I embrace the uncertainty? How do I surrender to what is going on in my life? Now, I feel like so many people get surrender wrong. Even though I say there's no right or wrong, I mean that, but hear me out here. Because so many people think they get to surrender when they're just fed up and they wave the white flag. I'm done. I'm done. Surrender isn't passive. It's not, I'm done. It's not, you make all the decisions and I'm just going to sit here. Surrender is still a very active process. Surrender is about actively choosing how you're going to show up and how you're going to see the world. It's letting go of control. It's letting go of the expectation of it needing to be a certain way, because you want things to be a certain way out of fear. So what surrender is actually doing is letting go of fear, letting go of the fear that things aren't going to be the way that you want them to go, that when you surrender, you allow for the magic. It's when you start to say, okay, I'm going to do everything I can in this world. However, there is this point of letting go. It's following the inspired action, not the forced action. There is a difference. I will explain in a moment, but it's following that inspired action and then letting go, surrendering to the unknown, surrendering to the results, surrendering to the next step. So often when we are too controlled in our lives and it has to go a certain way, we don't know anything. Are you kidding? How am I supposed to know how things need to go in the best way? I am totally open to things being different, and world, show me how good this can get. I don't know how good this can get. I don't know how amazing my life can be. Show me. Show me how good this can get. And that to me is what surrender is. That element of just letting go and allowing the world to show you and trusting that you're not in this alone. The world is working with you. Everything is happening for you. And you just need to keep taking your next best step and then letting go without control and without force. And so let me describe the difference between inspired action and forced action, because I used to live in forced action for a long, long, long time. I was very, very much into making it happen, doing all the things, do, overachieving. That was my middle name. And I was constantly forcing. I was doing what I thought needed to get done, but it was coming from a very different place, because that action was coming from fear. What do I have to do to be successful? What do I need to do to show up? And when I stopped acting and showing up from that place, I was able to move slower, but I was able to make much better decisions about what I was doing with my time because I was able to truly tune in. What do I need to do? What are my next steps? And show up and act and perform from alignment, not from fear. So I want you to start looking at your actions and the things that you do on a daily basis. Are you doing them because you think you need to? Are you doing them out of fear because you feel like if you don't do them, you're screwed and or you're not going to make any money? Are you doing them because they come from your soul? They come from this deeper desire and deeper knowingness that this is your next step. Because those are very different. And I know you can feel it when I explain that. And for me, that was huge. I had to stop doing from force because when I was doing from force, I was exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed, and it got me nowhere. I would wake up every single day with this question in my mind. And it was the first thing that I would say is, what are you going to do today? What do you need to do to be successful? It was exhausting and I was depressed and I was still broke. It was not working. And so this was all at the time that I was going through my mental Olympics, which was such a gift, yet also so painful. But I knew there was a different way. And here's where also, when I realized, oh, the first question going through my mind is, what are you going to do today? I thought to myself, okay, if I had a partner and my partner said the same things I say to myself every day, would I want that partner? And the answer was hell's no. I would never want someone to wake up and look at me and say, you got to go, Vanessa, you're already late. I can't believe you didn't wake up half an hour ago. What are you going to do today? You have to get going. I'd be like, shut up, get out of here. You are not helping. So imagine that your thoughts are your partner. Would you like that partner? You have to start being your best partner, your best cheerleader, your best friend right now. Because if you don't start, no one else is going to. And from there, it just continues to expand because you start to teach people how to treat you. No one will treat you worse than you treat yourself. So if your bar is really, really low and you treat yourself really, really shitty, your relationships are going to reflect that. I'm sorry, because you're so used to beating yourself up that when other people do it, it's not really going to faze you. And so in order to make this shift within me, I actually set my alarm on my phone to go off every hour. You can do every 2 hours if you want. And every time that alarm went off, I asked myself 2 questions. How am I feeling? And what was I just saying to myself? And what this does, the alarm exercise, is it helps you to see patterns and stories that are happening potentially in your subconscious that you're not aware of. And every time that alarm went off, oh my goodness, I was usually telling myself, what do I need to do right now? And that is so exhausting and not helpful. And so do you see how in these different tools, I started to see patterns? I started to see where the inconsistencies were. This is what brought me into aligned action, into surrender, into slowing down. Because at the end of the day, in order for you to go through this, your awakening, you got to slow down. You have to start paying attention to your triggers, to your thoughts. Do you notice? Within my 5-step system, we talked about stop, breathe, listen, validate, rewire. We have to slow down to stop the stories and to stop the habits. The alarm exercise, we have to slow down to increase our awareness of what's actually going through our thoughts. And once you start to do that, you get to, this is actually from the movie. Well, I'm going to quote this first and then I'll give you my version. Remember in the movie, Eat, Pray, Love, and he says to her, I think were they in Bali? And the man said to Julia Roberts' character, you have to start choosing your thoughts like you choose your wardrobe every day. And I could not agree more. My version of this is I always envisioned a library of books, and every book was a different emotion. And the more I got comfortable and aware of my emotions, the good and the bad, I was able to choose my thoughts like a library. What book do I want? What book do I want to read? And the interesting part is so many people don't know their emotions. They don't know how the good emotions feel and they don't know how the bad emotions feel. I was reading a book and he had said how often we even don't feel the pain. And I remember sitting in my bed and really putting my hand on my heart and asking myself to go back to when my mom died so I could actually feel it. Because for me, I needed to feel the grief to release it. And there's a book called The Body Keeps Score, I believe that it's called. For me, I really believe that. I believe in my body. If I don't feel my emotions, they get stuck. And they're still there. Just because I don't pay attention to them and just if I ignore them, they're still there. I feel the pain. I feel hurt. I feel triggered. And that's why, for me, my 5-step system works so well, where I listen to it, validate it, and then reprogram it. Because I've acknowledged it, I've felt it, and then I'm moving through. You're not making your emotions wrong. The bad emotions aren't bad, even though we call them bad. They're not bad. They need to be felt and acknowledged. And that's the thing. I don't even remember where half of these things come from anymore because I read so many books. So you'll have to forgive me. But I remember hearing this other analogy of your emotions being players on a team. So let's pretend we're playing a basketball game and you're the coach and you have a bench full of players. Every player has a specific skill and every player is needed at a specific time. Here's the caveat is as the coach, the best coaches know their players. They know their skills. They know the pros, the cons, when they should play, when they shouldn't. You have to start knowing your bench. You have to start knowing your players. And then the rule of this game is a little bit different than a real basketball game. But you can only play one player at a time. So you're going to have to really intentionally and carefully choose which player do you want on the court at which time. But you have to be the best coach. You have to know your players, the good and the bad. So start building your library of books right now. If you don't like the books analogy, think about the clothes analogy. You could create a perfume analogy. What scent are you putting on right now? And that's what becomes so powerful. And I would play around with this. Even I remember sitting on the toilet in the morning and having a really busy day and thinking and feeling overwhelmed already. Oh my gosh, I have so many things on my to-do list. And I just sat there and I said, no, which book do I want to pick up right now? I get to feel like I have nothing to do today, even if I have a full calendar. And so I remember pulling out my vacation book. How does it feel like I'm on vacation? How does it feel when I have nothing to do? And the better you get at paying attention to these emotions, the more powerful you get in your everyday life, that you can just choose an emotion. Now, I truly believe that as you get better and better, different things will happen. So I remember thinking, okay, I've mastered this. And that's when I fell in love. And that's when I found my partner. And then feeling like, okay, I've mastered this. And then I had a baby, right? The world just continues to evolve and give us, I don't even want to say challenges, but gives us opportunities to continue to practice what we know and who we are on a deeper and deeper and deeper level. Every single person and every single experience, whether it's your partners, your children, your friends, your family, your business, they are all a vehicle to help you find out more about you and to help you connect with the highest potential of who you are. I truly believe that. And when I was single and dating, I felt that way about dating, that every man was here to show me how I needed to fill myself up first. If I was looking for a man to be a certain thing, give me safety or security or validation, I said, no, that's nobody's job but me. And so often in our relationships, we look for other people to fulfill things that we aren't giving ourselves. And that has to be an inside job first. You have to make yourself feel safe. You have to validate yourself. So ask yourself, what are you looking for in other people right now? Or even in your business, right? What are you looking for outside of yourself? And how can you start giving it to yourself now? because you don't need, really, boldly, you don't need anything. You don't. You think that you need things because it's going to make you feel better. But once you start feeling great within you right now, that's the most powerful person, in my opinion, the person that doesn't need anything. And then that's when you get everything you've ever wanted. And that's when you know your manifestations and your goals are right around the corner. When they don't feel like a big deal, when you don't need them, when they just feel like the next best step, when they feel like they're already done and you don't want them. And this kind of connects back to my need and desire to do. It was really coming from a place of not feeling like I was good enough, that I needed to do good, be good in order to be loved, in order to be worthy, in order to be enough. And like you can hear it in my voice, I really feel for that girl. That was exhausting. And coming to the point, and it was funny because I never really connected when people asked me, do you feel worthy? I'm like, oh yeah, I feel worthy. But ask yourself, if you don't do anything from here on forward, are you enough? And that's not the same as that if you have a passion in your heart and you want to show up in that passion, that's not the same. I'm saying actually just doing things. If you stopped doing, would you be enough? Just being. And I hope in this episode, in this podcast, you start questioning how you can start being the person that you want to become. Because I know you know all these things, but are you actually doing it, living it, and showing up as him or her? Be that person now. And once you start connecting to that, it's so beautiful because you become so much more clear. You know your next step. Life becomes so much more peaceful. I remember going through my phase 2. My phase 2 was a while. It was a long time. And I remember thinking to myself, my cornerstone is always peace. Nothing is worth me losing my inner peace over. And that's what continued to get me through. That's what continued to get me through the triggers and all the stuff. Nothing is worth me losing my inner peace over. And I had this deep desire to know what it was like to connect to my highest potential. And that just continues to expand. And through that, I learned a lot of other things. I learned about my own fear, how fear showed up in my life, what I was actually scared of. And I still continue to learn about that. But how my body and mind responded in fear, because fear is smart. Fear will often pretend to be your intuition. And oftentimes people get that confused. My intuition versus fear. Oh, that doesn't feel right. I'm not going to do that. Well, is that your fear talking or is that your intuition talking? And a lot of times we don't know the difference. Here's a quick tip with that. For me, my intuition is gentle and soft and short term. She tells me my next best step. She doesn't think too far in advance. She doesn't really care too far in advance. She cares about the next step and how we feel right now. She's also very neutral. She doesn't feel heavy. When I get like oh, that doesn't feel right, I can tell that it's fear because I can feel resistance. I can feel anger. I can feel sadness. I can feel frustration. Pay attention to the underlying emotion of the feeling, because for me, intuition's always neutral. And so I started to really learn about my intuition, about fear, about trusting myself, about femininity and owning my feminine gifts. And the most beautiful was love. What does love feel like? How do I show up in love every single day? Loving myself, loving others. And so many things help that. For me, I loved breath work, was super cool. Meditation was really helpful to start slowing down my mind and get really comfortable with slowing down and being more aware and just paying attention to my thoughts. And all of these things really help me to continue showing up and shining my light and knowing who I was and not playing small, not dimming my light for anybody. And so I hope that in this episode, it is giving you permission to change, to start your own journey, to do your life and your business your way. But the your part of that sentence is connecting to what does your mean? What do you want your life to look like and feel like? It gets to be a decision. You have a choice. And really to start to show up in your highest potential, no matter what. No matter what the world is telling us, no matter what other people are telling us, the world needs you. And in what areas of your life are you hiding you? Are you not sharing and showing who you are? So I think this whole episode is really who is the you? Who are you? What do you want? What do you want your life to look like? And like I mentioned, that's always evolving. For me, my next chapter is to continue to move slow, to continue to tune in. And now as a mom, I'm continuously tuning into who am I? What do I want? What is my next step? What is my next chapter? What does that look like? You have to continue to ask these questions every single day, or you're going to wake up 20, 30, 40 years from now thinking, who am I and how did I get here? A couple other elements that I'm also moving through right now, and I continue to go deeper, is releasing judgment of myself and others. Because that's a habit that I've had for so many years. And so for me, I continue to have to come back to my mental Olympics on judgment and just say, stop. That is not our truth. We know different. And connect to love, connect to how God sees myself and others, connect to what love looks like and feels like, connect to a greater sense of being and understanding of who I am and who other people are at their core and going there. Not paying attention to the human nonsense and noise, but just coming back to the core and the truth of who we are. And that actually connects to the next thing that I'm also continuing to integrate is the fact that I know, and this isn't always easy, that I know I came to this earth for my love of people. And my mentor, Sarah Landon, said this in one of our calls. And actually, you can listen to our podcast together. It was one of my first episodes. And she says, you came here for your love of humanity. And I think, oh, that's so frustrating and so annoying because the old me really hated people. But she hated people because she was scared. She was scared of people. She was scared of what they thought of her and what they would do and what they would say. And even in saying this right now, I can feel it in my chest. And I know that fear is still there. That's what I'm still moving through which actually connects to the third thing that I'm moving through right now is community. Because, I have a community. I've had this community for so many years. And part of me has actually been scared of the community because I have experienced hate. I have witnessed people's triggers and lashing out on me. And that scared me. It was really scary because I wanted to be understood. I wanted to be loved. And it emphasized my hate of people, of how frustrating people can be and how awful people can be. And you know what? They can when they're in fear. And I'm choosing not to live in fear. So if I release my fear, then judgment isn't an issue. Then I can come back to my truth that I love humans. And I can come back to my truth that I am safe to build a community and to lead others. And as I say it out loud, it feels so true and so good for me. So I just continue. Those are the things that I'm really emphasizing and embodying right now. But like I said, I continue to look at my next chapter and share my purpose and share my skills and show up. And now being a partner, a wife, a mom, those are labels that carry such beautiful experiences that I am moving through and experiencing and enjoying every moment. I truly am. It is a reminder to continue to be present with everything that you're experiencing right now, the good, bad, and the ugly, because it's all perfect and you are exactly where you need to be. So I'm going to actually end this podcast on one more tool that I didn't mention, coming back to presence, and that is a presence walk. Because I noticed as I was going through life that my mind would often take over. What do I need to do? Where do I need to go? Right? We've talked about this action many times. So I created this little presence walk where I would go outside my front door and not plan anything. I wouldn't plan when I was going to turn right, when I was going to turn left, where I was going to go. I just observed and I saw how quickly my thoughts went into, oh, you're going to turn here, turn left here, go there. Where am I going to go? And I was just like, no, stop. Let's just be present in each moment. What do I need to do right now? Well, take a step with my right foot. Great. And sometimes for minutes, I would just walk and say, right, left, right, left. And then I'd see a crosswalk coming and I'd think, oh, I'm going to turn right up there. And I'd say, stop. When you get to the crosswalk, then you can decide. And I'd get to the crosswalk, take a deep breath, and then decide. And that just helped me to stay really present and to slow down. And everything that I'm experiencing right now, even being a mom, is to be present and realize that I've always been very goal driven and oriented. I have so many dreams and I have so many goals, and those things are beautiful. And we live in this world where we're constantly chasing the next goal, chasing the next vacation, the next experience. And I'm so lucky in my life that I get to experience all of those things. But I also continue to remind myself and remember that life isn't about all of those things. They're great and they're so fun and they add to life. The trips and the goals and the accomplishments are fabulous, but in between all of those are just the ordinary days. So getting so comfortable and satisfied and feeling good in the ordinary days. And that really comes back to when we spoke about not needing anything, because you don't need anything when you're living in the ordinary days. Because life is perfect. You're exactly where you need to be. And you couldn't get any happier than you already are. You can't get any happier than you already are. Live there. You are living in heaven on earth right now. So create your heaven on earth intentionally. I promise you it is possible. And if you need help and you need accountability, let me know. I am always here for you. I am always cheering you on. I love you so much. That's all for today. Until next time, trust yourself, shine your light, and stay true to your heart and mind. Love you.